It isn't easy to write a commencement address. I have no doubt that many of you seated before me will give one or two of your own at some point. Then you'll see for yourselves. The pay sucks too, but still you'll do it because it's an honor. The hard part is that you're speaking to two very distinct audiences. There are the graduates, and then there are their parents. Group one, when asked where they went to school, will likely answer, in the New York area? Or, Columbia? I'm sorry, what did you say? Columbia? It's like someone asked, what is that blister on your upper lip? Herpes? This happens at Harvard and Yale as well, and I cannot for the life of me understand it. You say the name of your school like it's something to be ashamed of, when, in fact, I'm sorry, but it's just the opposite. And you all do this. I was shocked a few years back when I met a young woman at a book signing. Did you have a degree, I asked. Oh, yes, she told me. I went to Brown. She said it matter-of-factly, and when I pointed out that Ivy League graduates are never so forthcoming, she said, oh, no, not Brown University. I went to Brown College in Toronto. They misspelled my degree on my diploma and wrote that I'd majored in broadcasting. My father was furious, made him correct it. It is safe to assume that your names and degrees will be properly spelled on the diplomas that will soon be handed out. Not that you, the graduates, will notice one way or the other. I'm going to guess that exactly none of you will have it framed and hang it on your wall, which I get. Unless you're a doctor or lawyer, it looks sort of desperate. Not for your parents, though, many of whom will likely have copies made and hand them out to relatives so they can hang one on their wall as well. See that? My niece went to Columbia. They won't mumble and hedge, and neither will your parents. They're proud to tell people their child went to school here. Hell, I'm proud just to be giving this address. Have you given one before? People ask. Well, yes, I have, as a matter of fact. I tell them I gave one at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, one at SUNY Binghamton, one at Oberlin, and one at Princeton. Then I say, did I mention the Princeton one? That was before Columbia. Of all the above, my only failure was at Binghamton. It was a December graduation, and I advised the students that while they were still young and good-looking, they should have as much sex as possible. Even if you don't like the other person all that much, I said. I suggested that while they were at it, they should also do lots of drugs. It was sound advice, but a good 2/3 of the audience had flown in from Southeast Asia. Of the remaining third, most were under the age of 8. My message did not play to the crowd at SUNY Binghamton, and in retrospect, I should have toured the campus first or talked to the dean. At my last speech, an angry man, the father of the one conservative student ever to attend Oberlin, rushed the stage and tried to attack me, angry over a joke I'd told. Looking back, my most successful address was at the School of the Art Institute. And what made it good was that I could relate. I had gone to school there myself, so knew what it was like to be a student there and to have parents in the audience. My degree was a BFA, and what I mainly remember about my graduation day was being scared, which was funny. I hadn't felt that way before school or even during it when we had crits, which were genuinely terrifying. For those of you in other disciplines, end of semester fine arts critiques are when the inmates get to run the asylum. It's rare to leave a crit unbloodied. 20 years from now, you'll likely still recall some of the abuse heaped upon you by one or more of your classmates. Then you'll maybe Google them and think, Pretty strong opinion for the assistant manager of a Marshall's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was an older student, enrolled when I was 27 for painting and sculpture. When I graduated at 30, I was mainly writing, which I'd been doing fanatically for a decade. I always figured my post-college life would be pretty much like my pre-college one. This is to say, I'd work whatever measly job I could find, preferably one I didn't have to think about too hard, and then come home and sit at my desk until I passed out. It was a perfectly fine existence. I had friends. There was a small but growing audience for my work. But now that I had a degree, people would be expecting more of me. They were people who, for the most part, knew nothing about writing or painting. Not that I could fault them for it. They weren't creative in that way. And popular culture always gets art wrong. We've all seen the movie where the red-hot 25-year-old has his big opening at the Soho Gallery, even though there aren't galleries in Soho anymore, and no one gets their own show at age 25. Cut to the artist drinking champagne as the dealer trots over, clutching an empty sheet of peel-off red dots. "The collectors have already snapped it all up," she pants. And the work, my goodness, derivative doesn't begin to do it justice. "This one's called Contemplation 2, a gallery assistant will say to a sophisticated-looking couple who nods. There's always a hint of phoniness about them, a suggestion that they're the only true audience for fine art. "I like the lines," one of them will say. "I find Timothy's work very evocative." On an episode of Sex and the City I watched on a plane once, Charlotte has to persuade a reclusive and temperamental painter to have a show at her gallery. She pays a visit to the guy's studio and finds that he's now focusing exclusively on vaginas. They're not super realistic. If Georgia O'Keeffe made pictures of caves with the brush held between her toes, this is what they'd look like. The most ridiculous part of the episode was that the exhibit was seen as controversial, a scandal, when by the late 1990s, no one would have been outraged by vagina paintings. Why isn't there a GLAAD or an anti-defamation league for art? For whatever reason, most of what's on television and movies is closer to parody than to anything approaching the work that's actually being talked about. So the people we know who aren't in our fields have to rely more often than not on cliches and stereotypes. The starving artist is a big one. My goddaughter is a starving artist in Brooklyn. Should anyone ever refer to you this way, I think the only appropriate response is to throw up on them. Then say, "If I was starving, why would I have had all those ramen noodles in my stomach?" Inspiration is another cliche. What inspires you? When I hear this, I think of something the painter Chuck Close once said. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. All the best ideas come out of process. The most damaging misconceptions about an artistic life are those regarding failure, and it's those that haunted me after I left the Art Institute. Graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering or biochemistry, and if the economy's good, you'll soon have a job in your field. Very few people, though, publish a book or have their play produced 3 months out of school. It just doesn't work that way. It's the same with visual art and filmmaking. You go to college, you graduate, and then you put in the hours, by which I mean years. To support yourself, you maybe wait tables or clean houses. Maybe you work as an assistant manager at Marshall's in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is actually a lovely town and has 3 separate establishments where you can get drunk and throw axes. People will want to put a timer on your success, and you can't let them get to you. I was told by my writing teacher, a man named Jim McManus, that if I remained focused and wrote as if my life depended upon it, when the time was right, someone would call and ask if they could publish my book. It sounds very pie in the sky. I mean, how would they know my number? But because I was in 1987 and still am completely incapable of promoting myself, I not only believed Jim, but felt relieved. It seemed I could just write, and the rest would eventually take care of itself. Of course, not everyone was as patient as me and my former teacher. There was my dad, a sort of anti-cheerleader who'd been rooting against me my entire life. There was this woman I knew in Chicago, a meeting planner for medical organizations. I'll call Marjorie. We met when I was a freshman at the Art Institute. I was working part-time for a wood refinisher and was hired to strip the oak in her dining room. Later, I cleaned her house and would do odd jobs for her. Marjorie was 10 years older than me, and I liked that she was so different from the crowd I went to school with. Square and dependable, with tightly permed hair and oversized glasses. Marjorie favored muumuus and smoked extra long, extra thin cigarettes that unintentionally made her hands look huge, like mitts. She had a framed picture of a clown in her living room and a 3-inch tall porcelain ballerina displayed unironically beneath a glass dome near the sound system she regularly popped Kenny G CDs into. Though our tastes were wildly different, we became close friends. Marjorie had a good sense of humor and graduated from Loyola with a double major in history and Russian. She saw lots of plays and movies. She read. I recall picking a book off her shelf when I was dusting it one afternoon and coming upon this highlighted quote by Soren Kierkegaard. Man is spirit. But what is spirit? Spirit is a self. But what is the self? The self is a relation that relates itself to itself, or is the relations relating itself to itself in the relation. The self is not the relation, but is the relations relating itself to itself. If, however, the relation relates itself to itself, this relation is the positive third, and that is the self. I remember asking Marjorie what this meant, then trying to weigh her answer against the sign she had hanging on the wall of her home office that read, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps." The thing is, people are contradictions. 3 years after graduating from the Art Institute, I moved to New York City. I figured I'd get a job of some sort, but it was hard because I can't really do anything. Never learned to drive or operate a cash register. I type, but only with one finger, and have to look at the keyboard while doing it. Just before my money ran out, I found work as an elf at Macy's Herald Square. I didn't get the job because I had a Bachelor of Arts degree. They hired me because I'm short. A week before Christmas, Marjorie sent me a letter. It arrived just as I was leaving from my shift, and I read it in the employee cafeteria while on my afternoon break. "I am writing you as a friend," she began, "as someone who loves and cares about you." She then told me that I needed to quit writing. "You're 33 years old and have to realize that it is never going to happen for you," she said. The letter didn't make me angry because it was true. Marjorie loved me, cared about me too. That didn't mean I had to take her shitty advice, though. I'd been writing every day for the past 13 years and could no sooner quit than I could stop getting up in the morning or early afternoon. On Christmas, I wrote. On vacation. The day that I started doing it, my life began. I recognized that immediately. Expressing myself on paper, choosing this word over that one, gave me a sense of purpose and community, not just with the handful of writers I knew, but with all the authors of all the books that I read and admired, both living and dead. It was the cord that connected me to the world and made it mine. The day I received Marjorie's letter, I was a better writer than I'd been the day before, and that in itself was an accomplishment. My work hadn't appeared anywhere worth mentioning, but neither did it deserve to. This was a process, and the goal was to simply keep doing it, to learn from everything I read, and to improve. Shortly before leaving Chicago, I was hired by the Art Institute to teach a creative writing class. I wasn't qualified, but someone backed out at the last minute, and Jim McManus kindly suggested me as a replacement. At school, I wore a tie and carried a briefcase. I asked my students to address me as Mr. Sedaris, because all my life I had wanted to be called that. A year later, in the Macy's cafeteria, Marjorie's letter on the table in front of me, I wore a forest green velvet costume with a matching hat that had sequins on it. At work, we had to go by our elf names, and mine was Crumpet. This was hardly the New York life I had planned for myself. It was the one I wound up with, though, and for that, I am eternally grateful. When I told people about my job at Macy's, they laughed. Every day at work, something outrageous happened, and I recorded it all in my diary. A few years later, when I was working for a moving company, a guy who had heard me read once called to ask if I had anything Christmassy that might work for a local radio show he had in Chicago. I recorded bits of the diary I'd kept while working at Macy's, and after airing it on his local NPR station, he put it on a national program called Morning Edition. 10 million people heard it, including an editorial assistant at Little Brown, who looked me up in the phone book and called to ask if I could have a manuscript he could possibly read and consider publishing. Well, actually, I said, opening my desk drawer, I've got one right here. Not long afterward, the New Yorker rang and asked if I might consider writing for them. Let me think about it. Yes, I said. I have a friend who teaches acting at a small college in North Carolina, and who says that it's a microaggression to tell people their hard work will eventually pay off. True, there are those who will fall by the wayside. You can never underestimate the power of luck, being in the right place at the right time. But I think the work hard and then work harder formula is still the best one going. I have no doubt that those of you seated before me will have your own books published. Your plays will be produced. You'll have shows in galleries and museums. Audiences will race to the movies you make or act in, or read the articles you write. If it can happen for me, I guarantee it can happen for anyone. And when it does, there'll be people in your life who will somehow only get wind of your bad reviews, never your good ones, who will say, oh, I stopped reading the New Yorker ages ago. It hasn't been any good since the late 1970s. For a while afterwards, theirs might be the voices in your head when you sit down to work each morning. We all get kicked around. We all need something to cling to occasionally, especially at the beginning of our careers. And I hope that when you start to question yourself, you will remember that if nothing else, you went to Columbia. An extraordinary school with first-rate teachers that is notoriously hard to get into and only accepts people who show great promise. Should you ever forget this, I'm sure your parents will be more than happy to remind you. Thank you.